How do you get your high fidelity wireframes to be just that? High fidelity, pixel perfect, tight, clean, and systemized. You're not the first one to ask, but if you've made it to this point, you're just about to find out. I'll teach you how 99% of the high fidelity wireframes and projects are designed at some of the biggest tech companies in the world. You'll learn about rapid user testing, how to make data-driven design choices, and how a design system is the best way to build a solid foundation for all of your design projects. This video is the third one out of the 4-part video series, Raw and Uncut UX Design Process through the lens of a fictional design project we call Skool. If you haven't already, watch the other videos first to make sure that you follow along. Let's go. Maze is a great user testing service to help you collect user insights fast and easily, and with prototypes that works directly with Figma, Sketch, and a few other tools. It allows you to pre-fill and prepare the entire test, whether you're looking to do usability, collect general user feedback, or test a design preference amongst your users. It will work in all of those cases. It's done all remotely, and the test report that you get helps you understand the key areas to improve. You get actionable insights which will serve as a guide when making data-driven design choices. The last two steps of our process, based on the UX focused checklist, are testing, collecting feedback, and then prioritizing which insights to focus on for the project. For our project, we wanted to test out the design preference and general thoughts or feelings of the 3 concepts that we came up with in the last video. Based on a brief introduction of the project, our value proposition, and showing the different ideas or concepts, we came down to test results that lean towards concept C, showing investment tips and recommendations right next to the saving accounts list view. It does make sense because out of all of the 3 concepts, it was the one that was visually perceived as more related. This preference is also backed up by the UX Gestalt law, the law of uniform connectedness, which states that elements that are visually connected are perceived as more related than elements with no connection. Besides that preference, we also heard from users that they would prefer to have the ability to minimize the side navigation as they feared feeling stressed and distracted by all of the available links in the sidebar navigation. And luckily, from our reference library that we curated earlier, there are a couple of different screenshots that we have as a reference to that type of collapsible navigation that we could look into. So now with these 2 critical priorities, we can feel confident enough to jump into the discussion with the engineering team and start designing high fidelity wireframes. It's common for UX designers to make the mistake of designing without consulting with the engineering team first, and vice versa. And a great digital experience relies heavily on a solid tech and design foundation. A complete design system, therefore, is a reflection of the principles, guidelines, and components that have been set up on both of these sides. So what is a design system, you ask? First and foremost, it's not just a Figma library. And it's definitely not just a style guide. It's all of that, plus more. It's a complete system that serves as the single source of truth on how a platform should be identified, used, designed, and built. From a design point of view, it consists of things like the identity, design principles, UX and UI best practices, component and pattern library, and functional documentation. On the development side of things, they also have a component and pattern library that reflects the things that have been designed on our end. And they also have a thorough technical documentation on how to build, maintain, and use the design system. The majority of all mobile apps use 2 of the biggest design systems as their core foundation, namely Google's Material Design System and Apple's Human Interface Guidelines. For websites or web apps, there are other alternatives as well. And in order to ensure good quality in both design and code, it's always recommended to start off with one of the major design systems as a base foundation. As a product or company grows larger, it might branch off into its own design system like Spotify, Shopify, or Salesforce. For the Skool project, the engineering team decided to build the Skool platform in React, which is a popular, highly reliable, and fast JavaScript library. Having a fast and reliable platform is a top priority from both the business, product, tech, and design end, so coming to this conclusion was a no-brainer. Since the site will be built on React, we started to look into the design system library called MUI, Material UI. It's a design system that unifies React with material design. So we'll use a lot of the principles and guidelines from Google's material design and use MUI component library as our foundation, which is both available for developers and for designers on Figma. One of the best ways to learn about good design practices is by getting familiar with different design system documentations. In our project, we will start off by looking through the MUI documentation that is available on their website. Let's check it out. All right, so let's go to MUI.com, and at the top you can find something called Docs. Under MUI Core, you have this section called Material UI. This is where we find all of the documentation related to Material UI. In the very first page, you just have very general information like Material UI overview, some introduction, etc. They have some example projects, some templates, some FAQ, but the most crucial information for you as a designer is under the section called Components and another section called, I think it's Customization. Yes. So under Components, you have all of the different segments related to the different categories of all of the elements, like Input section related to all of the different elements that falls under that category, like buttons, checkboxes, radio buttons, etc. Once you go through these sections, you can see all of the different interactions, the examples, the actual components, so you can test it out and see how they're intended to be used, but also all of the different rules and guides in relation to that specific element. So going through the list of all of the different categories of elements here on the left side is a really good way to get familiar with Material UI. And then at the very bottom, we have Customization. You have a few sections that are interesting, like theming is good to know about. I think though, yeah, this basically breaks down more so the general aspect of how themes work, but then you get to the juicy part under palette, dark mode, typography, and you get a better idea of how to actually work with the colors and the different themes that you can create in order to customize the design system in accordance to your brand or your product. You have some very specific guides on how spacing is used. The 8-pixel grid is used, for instance. So yeah, there are a bunch of different rules and things. A lot of developer material as well, but a lot of good information for designers too. Now we have a pretty solid understanding of how and what to expect from this design system. Now let's see where we can download or purchase the MUI Figma component library to help us get familiar with that as well. On the very first page under products, you have something called design kits. And if you click on buy now, you can find the actual Figma kit. Let me see where that is. Yeah, here you have MUI library for Figma. They also have it available for Sketch and Adobe XD. There's a live preview that you can have a look at. It's $70. So if you have a client project, or if you're working for a company or an organization, most probably they can provide the expense for this Figma library. I would say it's a really good way for you to get more knowledge and more familiar with how a design system actually works. There's a bunch of different free design systems and free design kits available as well, which could be a good start. But if you're serious about this, I think $69 is a good investment. Once you download this, it will show up as a Figma file on your computer, and then you basically just upload that or drag that in to your Figma team and then make it available as a library. Let me show you how to do that. So once you've downloaded the file, I think there are two files available, one for the actual design library, design system library, which basically just consists of all of the different components and patterns, and then you have a separate file for all of the material icons. I would highly suggest dragging both of them in and then open up both of them and make sure to enable that as a library in your settings. This is done the following way. Click on assets and then under team library, make sure to publish this as a library. So you make that available. You make sure that everything is selected. There's a lot of styles and things included, components. So publish it, and then after maybe a couple of minutes or seconds, depending on how large the file is, you will see this being available as a library in a new Figma file. We will look at some of the core things we can pick apart and reuse from the MUI Figma library. In my opinion, a lot of these components can be built much better on Figma, so I will simply just use the MUI Figma components as a reference or a foundation, but we'll build them up from scratch on Figma for our project. That way, you'll also be able to see how I use different Figma techniques like auto layout, variants, and component properties. Alright, so before we dig into the MUI Figma library, we can take a look at the concept that we have so far, concept C, and try to figure out which types of components that will be necessary for us to keep an eye out for. So we have at the very top the app bar or the top bar. In Material UI, they usually refer to this component as an app bar, so we'll be looking for that. Some kind of a sidebar is definitely going to be needed. In the sidebar, we have all of the different list items with icons that we can look for. Segmented tabs, which is a kind of a menu or a sub-level of a menu. We will be needing different kinds of card components for sure. Some title sections or text blocks, text or title heading sections in general. We will also need a couple of different other minor components like progress bars, perhaps some different variations of icons and sizes. Same thing here at the very top. I guess we also need to look for a few different buttons that we can utilize, and perhaps a drop-down menu, because I'm thinking that it might be good for us to have a drop-down menu in order for the user to be able to switch between different types of accounts under the goal card. So those are some of the main things that we'll be looking for. So before working on the design in our Figma file, let's look into the MUI Figma library. So once you have that uploaded onto your Figma account, they have an overview page where they basically walk you through some of the very basics of what you can find in this Figma library, and also how to use it. But as mentioned, what we'll be focusing on mainly is to look at these components as a reference so we can build them up from scratch, just so we use their foundation, but we will build them in a different way than how they're built here in the Figma library. So let's start to look over on this page where they have screens and layouts. They have a few different templates or examples that we can actually make use of. So let's dig into these ones and start to pick them all apart. For the sake of this project, we will focus primarily on delivering high-fidelity wireframes and not the final UI mockups. Basically, a high-fidelity wireframe helps communicate the fundamental structure and design, whereas high-fidelity mockups are as close as you can get to the finished end product. High-fidelity wireframes are usually enough for the engineering team to start making time estimates and planning their work together with the rest of the team. Let's kick this off. Before we jump into the high-fidelity wireframes, I just realized that we forgot to look for the tab navigation. Let's find those as well. They should be here under tabs. Perfect. So we can pick this apart. These are just called tabs, and it seems to be a Figma variant. So let's pull that in. We can add it under navigation. You look for library, you can find just the one you're looking for, and it's called tabs, and we can bring that in. I will probably design these a little bit differently, but you can still use these as reference. All right, now we're good to go. So as a first step, what I will probably do is to duplicate this page, call it Hi-Fidelity Wireframes, and then I would pull in the concepts, the rough sketch that we had earlier, just so we can use that as a reference. And then I would probably just keep these here in the duplicate and then bring them in anytime that I need them. But what we'll probably start doing is putting all of the, we will probably look into all of these different components and start recreating them, at least the ones that we feel are most necessary, and then start creating the wireframes here on the right side. So I'll just keep this one right here. Yeah, we can just keep it like that for now. So yeah, let's start creating all of these components. We're getting close to the end, guys. So far, we have covered how you go from a project brief to researching, understanding, and framing the problems to solve for. We have designed and tested low fidelity sketches and wireframes, prioritized and picked a direction to focus on, chosen a design system foundation, and then turned the design concept into high fidelity wireframes. In the next and the last video of this project, we will go through the Figma file, start organizing it, and work on our handoff skills. Make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and show your support by hitting the like button below. Catch you guys in a few. Peace.